My dear friends, good people who believe in virtue and light, listen well. You stand today not at the summit of your morality, but at the threshold of your own soul's abyss. The light you cherish, the goodness you prize, they are not enough. For a tree to reach the heavens, its roots must descend into hell. We cannot soar if we remain above the soil of our own darkness. You, who strive to be good, must ask, what do you deny within? The shadow is not an enemy, but a wounded friend. It hides in impulsive anger, unacknowledged envy, silent shame. Yet within that obscurity there lies your untapped strength, creativity, courage, authenticity. And when we relegate these parts to the unconscious, they do not vanish. Rather, they grow blacker, denser, until they erupt. To be virtuous, then, is not to deny your darkness, it is to own it. To look into your mirror and say, here is my shame, my fear, my rejected self, and it too is part of me. Only by embracing the shadow can you dissolve hypocrisy and awaken true empathy and self-worth. Hypocrisy is the mask of the unexamined soul, diagnosing others for sins your own mirror betrays. To rise toward the light, one must first descend into the depths. This truth is not a matter of poetic fancy, but of psychological necessity. The human being cannot expand heavenward without equally extending downward, just as a tree cannot reach toward the sky without its roots burrowing into the soil, so too the soul cannot achieve its highest possibilities without first coming to terms with its lowest realities. The attempt to bypass this descent, to live only in the regions of light, virtue, and what is considered noble, creates nothing more than a shallow illusion of growth. Growth, real and transformative, demands that one confront the underworld of the psyche. What most people call being good often becomes a form of escape. Goodness, when it rests only on suppression, is fragile. It conceals the shadow, but it does not dissolve it. The shadow grows denser the more it is ignored, feeding upon denial. A man who insists on his gentleness may conceal aggression. A woman who prides herself on patience may harbor resentment. These qualities, buried and unacknowledged, do not vanish. They wait. They wait in the darkness of the unconscious until the day they erupt in destructive or irrational ways. This is why the descent is necessary. Without it, one does not become whole. To descend is not to embrace corruption or to justify cruelty. It is rather to recognize the realities of one's own nature, the impulses, the weaknesses, the drives that lie beneath the surface. The descent strips away illusion. It forces the individual to see that he is not only what he presents to the world, he is also what he hides from himself, and until he can admit this truth, his virtue is incomplete, precarious, and deceptive. Imagine a man who wishes to become wise. He studies, he reads, he cultivates patience and discipline, yet all the while he denies his envy of others, his hunger for recognition, his hidden pride. He may become respected, but his wisdom will lack substance, for it has no roots in reality. He has grown upward without growing downward, and so his tree, however tall, will topple in the storm. Growth into depth is painful, for the descent feels like a dying. To see what one would rather not see, to admit the failings that one has hidden beneath layers of self-image, this is a kind of death to the ego. Yet out of this death comes new life. The recognition of envy, for example, does not destroy the soul, but releases the energy hidden within it. That same energy, when acknowledged, can be transformed into admiration, into aspiration, into creativity, but when repressed, it festers and poisons. The same is true for every dark impulse. Within aggression lies strength. Within fear lies caution and wisdom. Within shame lies the longing for authenticity. To descend is to reclaim these forces, to bring them into service of life rather than to leave them lurking in the shadows. This is why one must grow down to grow up. Without roots in the dark earth, one becomes only a mask. Without confronting the abyss, one remains a prisoner of it. The work of depth is to descend, to integrate, and then to rise, not as a fragmented being, but as a whole person. To do otherwise is to live half a life, trapped in superficial virtues that crumble under pressure. The descent also breeds humility. Those who descend and face their own depths lose the illusion of superiority. They know their own capacity for error, their own hidden darkness, and in this recognition they gain compassion for the struggles of others. To accept one's own shadow is to recognize the common ground of humanity, where pride, fear, and weakness dwell in us all. Thus, the descent not only strengthens the individual, but also deepens his bond with the world. It is a paradox. To rise, you must sink. To see the light, you must first learn to walk in the night. To ascend toward spirit, you must have embraced matter. The higher the summit, the deeper the valley that supports it. Every expansion upward is matched by an expansion downward. This is the law of balance in the soul. So, when life pulls you into darkness, do not despise it. When you are confronted with impulses you wish not to see, do not deny them. They are part of the soil in which your destiny is planted. The task is not to remain pure in the fragile sense of untouched innocence, but to become pure in the deeper sense of integration, purity not through avoidance, but through wholeness. True greatness belongs not to those who never fall, but to those who have descended and risen again. They know the weight of the earth and the call of the sky, and they embody both. They have grown down, and therefore they can grow up. The parts of ourselves that we most fear, despise, or reject are not merely obstacles to our growth. They are also the very sources of our strength. It is a strange and unsettling truth that what we cast away into the dark corners of the psyche often contains the very energy we most need to live fully. The qualities we call undesirable, anger, envy, pride, fear, are not accidents of the soul, nor are they meaningless burdens. They are potential waiting to be transformed. What we call darkness is, in fact, raw vitality. To exile it is to exile a portion of our own life force. Each person carries within an unseen companion, a double whose presence is often felt but rarely acknowledged. This hidden figure carries everything we refuse to accept about ourselves, and yet, though we treat it as an enemy, it belongs to us no less than our virtues do. When ignored, this double grows distorted and dangerous. When confronted, it reveals itself as a bearer of strength. To recognize this truth requires courage, for it means admitting that what we fear most within ourselves may not be a monster but a misunderstood source of power. Consider the man who prides himself on his kindness and patience. He denies his anger, represses it, hides it beneath layers of politeness. Yet when life confronts him with injustice or betrayal, his denial leaves him defenseless. He becomes passive, compliant, incapable of standing for what he truly values. His virtue turns to weakness, but if he had learned to accept his capacity for anger, to listen to it and integrate it, that anger could have become strength, the power to protect, to assert, to draw boundaries. What he condemned as dangerous was, in truth, a hidden guardian of his integrity. Or take the woman who dreams of expressing her creativity, but suppresses her envy of those who dare to shine. She calls her envy shameful, and so it festers in silence. Yet if she dared to face it honestly, she would discover in it the seed of her own longing. The envy whispers, "You too can create, you too can shine." Transformed, it becomes inspiration and drive. The very quality she feared was a disguised guide toward her unlived potential. This is the paradox. The rejected self becomes the doorway to the greater self. What is despised in secret harbors the exact energy the conscious mind lacks. It is as though nature has hidden treasure in the most unlikely places, forcing us to descend into caves of fear and shame to retrieve it. By denying these depths, we remain half alive. By entering them, we recover the full measure of our vitality. To integrate these rejected parts does not mean to act out every dark impulse. Integration is not indulgence. It is awareness. It is the willingness to face what is present without denial and to claim its energy consciously. Aggression, when integrated, becomes courage. Fear becomes wisdom. Pride, once acknowledged, becomes dignity. Even cruelty, when brought to consciousness, can transform into clarity of will. The task is not to suppress or to glorify, but to recognize and to guide. The reason this work is so frightening is that we do not control what we deny. The parts of us that remain unconscious act upon us from the shadows. They influence our choices, our moods, our relationships without our knowing. The more they are ignored, the more forcefully they demand expression. They slip out in moments of rage, in sudden jealousies, in destructive habits. We say, "I don't know what came over me," because indeed something within us that we refuse to meet has taken control. But when these forces are faced and made part of conscious life, they no longer overwhelm us. They become allies rather than saboteurs. Life requires wholeness, not perfection. Wholeness demands that nothing be excluded, that every part of us finds its place. To stand in our strength, we must accept both light and darkness. Otherwise, we live as a fragment, one-sided and brittle. Those who embrace only what appears noble become hypocrites. Those who embrace both the noble and the rejected become authentic. The former live in fear of being exposed, the latter live in freedom, for they have nothing to conceal. It is often said that power corrupts, but the greater danger is that denial corrupts more deeply. For the man who denies his strength becomes weak, the woman who denies her desire becomes bitter, and the soul that denies its shadow becomes lifeless. Strength is not found in the rejection of darkness, but in its transformation. Thus, the invitation of life is to step into the inner cave where the exiled parts dwell, to enter with honesty, to listen without judgment, and to draw from those depths the power that has always been yours. For the hidden companion, once feared, becomes a source of vitality. The shadow ceases to be an enemy and becomes a teacher. And in this union you discover that the very thing you sought to escape was the missing strength you had been seeking all along. The greatest deception is not the lie told to another, but the lie told to oneself. The human being is skilled at masking what he does not wish to see. He builds ideals, morals, and principles to protect himself from his own contradictions. Yet the soul is not deceived. Beneath the surface, the denied parts of the self remain alive, waiting, whispering through dreams, appearing in sudden impulses, breaking through the polished surface of virtue. What the conscious mind pretends not to know, the unconscious remembers all too well. This is why honesty with oneself is the cornerstone of transformation. Without it, every noble effort collapses into pretense. A man who insists upon his purity while concealing his envy will, sooner or later, betray himself in hidden acts of spite. A woman who prides herself on her compassion, but secretly resents others, will, in her kindness, reveal subtle cruelty. They may not even notice, for self-deception blinds more thoroughly than ignorance. What they imagine as goodness becomes a mask, and behind the mask festers a hidden truth that sooner or later corrupts their actions. Hypocrisy is born when there is too great a distance between the image one presents and the reality one conceals. The wider the gap, the greater the strain on the soul. To live in such a state is to live in conflict, constantly defending a facade while suppressing the very forces that press for recognition. This inner division saps vitality, leaving the individual weary, anxious, and haunted by a sense of inauthenticity. He feels split because he is split. He feels hollow because a part of him has been exiled. To bring this division into wholeness requires the courage to admit uncomfortable truths. self-honesty is rarely flattering. It forces one to acknowledge envy, resentment, selfishness, cowardice, the very qualities we are trained to deny, yet to face them is not to be defeated by them, it is to rob them of their secret power. What is conscious can be integrated, guided, transformed. What is unconscious rules us from the shadows. Thus, honesty is liberation. By admitting what one is, one ceases to be driven blindly by what one denies. Consider the person who endlessly criticizes others for their arrogance. He may appear humble, even saintly, in his disapproval, yet his judgment betrays him, for it reveals a pride he refuses to see in himself. The harsher his condemnation, the deeper the denial. Were he to admit, "Yes, I too long to be admired, I too crave recognition," his judgment would soften, and his hidden pride would lose its tyrannical hold. But so long as he lies to himself, his virtue is hypocrisy, his humility an act. This is the great danger of moral ideals. They tempt us to project our rejected qualities onto others. Instead of admitting our own greed, we condemn the greedy. Instead of acknowledging our anger, we despise the violent. We imagine ourselves pure, but in truth we are simply blind to the depths of our own being. This blindness is more dangerous than sin, for it perpetuates conflict not only within the individual but also in society. Wars are fought not merely from hatred of others, but from hatred of what one refuses to see in oneself. Self-honesty, then, is not a luxury, it is a necessity for peace. To admit one's own weakness is to grow more tolerant of the weakness of others. To acknowledge one's own aggression is to understand, rather than demonize, the aggression of one's neighbor. The individual who has confronted his own darkness no longer needs to parade his virtues. He is free from the exhausting burden of appearing perfect. He is content to be real, and in that reality his actions become authentic. This authenticity does not look like flawless virtue. It looks like a man or woman who can say, "Yes, I am flawed. Yes, I have selfish desires, I have fear, I have anger, but I no longer deceive myself. I choose to guide these forces consciously, rather than be ruled by them unconsciously." Such a person may not appear saintly, but they radiate a strength and integrity far greater than the brittle image of perfection. To live in self-honesty is to live in wholeness. It is to allow every part of oneself, even the unpleasant ones, to have a voice. In listening to these voices, one discovers that none are evil in essence. They are energies distorted by denial. Once acknowledged, they reveal their meaning. Resentment may hide the desire for fairness. Fear may conceal the instinct for protection. Pride may cloak the longing for dignity. By being honest, one recovers these energies in their pure form. Thus, the task is simple yet severe. Stop pretending. Stop wearing the mask of exaggerated goodness while secretly resenting the burden it places on you. Stop condemning in others what you have not yet faced in yourself. Speak the truth within, even if only to yourself. This truth may wound the ego, but it heals the soul. When the split between mask and reality dissolves, hypocrisy fades, and authenticity emerges. You will no longer need to cling to virtue as a disguise, because you will have integrated the very forces that once threatened to expose you. In the end, self-honesty does not destroy goodness. It makes goodness real. It roots it in the soil of truth, where it can grow strong and unshakable. Only then can your life bear fruit that is not hollow but whole. ChatGPT said, "The most difficult act a person can perform is to accept themselves completely." This is not the shallow acceptance of one's outer identity, nor the comfortable embrace of one's virtues, but the radical willingness to face and integrate what has been hidden, denied, or despised within. To turn toward what one fears most in the soul is a terrifying step, for it feels as though one approaches chaos, and yet, precisely there, in that darkness, lies the possibility of freedom. Most people live in a state of partial being. They identify only with the traits that appear admirable, acceptable, or desirable, while disowning everything else. They present an image to the world, and soon they begin to believe in that image themselves. The problem is that life refuses to be so simple. The parts that are excluded do not disappear, they retreat into the depths of the psyche. From there, they exert their influence in indirect and often destructive ways. We wonder why our emotions betray us, why our relationships are strained, why our lives feel incomplete. It is because we have not yet embraced the fullness of what we are. The descent into one's rejected depths feels like defeat. It strips away illusions and exposes vulnerabilities. To admit jealousy, cowardice, cruelty, or lust can feel humiliating, yet in that humiliation lies the seed of liberation. What is seen loses its power to secretly dominate. What is faced can be transformed. It is not the darkness itself that enslaves us, but the refusal to acknowledge it. Denial creates chains, awareness breaks them. Take, for example, a man who insists on always being cheerful. He hides his sadness, suppresses his grief, and avoids all thoughts of despair. On the surface, he appears admirable, optimistic, full of light. Yet beneath, his unacknowledged sorrow grows heavier. It seeps into his body, into his moods, until it bursts forth in sudden outbursts or unexplained fatigue. Only when he turns to face his grief, to accept that sadness is part of him, does he begin to feel lighter. The acceptance does not destroy him, it heals him. What he feared was not an enemy, but a part of his humanity seeking recognition. Another person may deny their anger. Believing it dangerous, they suppress it in the name of peace. But peace built on denial is fragile. The anger gathers in silence, and eventually it erupts uncontrollably. If instead they acknowledge it, learn to feel it without fear, they discover that anger carries within it the energy of self-protection, the power to draw boundaries, the drive to act when something is unjust. What was once frightening becomes a source of strength when it is integrated. This is the paradox. Acceptance of darkness does not make us darker, it makes us whole. To accept does not mean to indulge every impulse or to glorify what is destructive. It means to acknowledge what exists, to give it a place in consciousness, and to use its energy in the service of life rather than in the service of chaos. The refusal to accept is what twists natural forces into harmful ones. The courage to accept untangles them and allows them to be lived in healthier forms. To resist this work is to live in bondage to the very forces one wishes to escape. A person who fears their own desires may spend their life in constant vigilance, exhausted by the effort of suppressing them. Another who refuses to admit their vulnerability may become rigid, armored, and incapable of intimacy. In both cases, the denial imprisons them. Liberation begins the moment they turn toward what they reject, when they say to themselves, "This too is mine." It is true that such acceptance feels like stepping into the unknown. The ego trembles at the thought of losing control. But one soon discovers that the darkness is not bottomless chaos. Within it lies order, meaning, and even guidance. The emotions and impulses we feared are revealed to be bearers of truth, pointing to unmet needs, unlived potentials, forgotten parts of the self. By accepting them, life expands. The individual who once felt half alive begins to feel the fullness of their existence. Freedom is not found in perfection, but in wholeness. To accept one's darkness is to no longer be haunted by it. It is to stand in the world without fear of being exposed, for nothing remains hidden. Such a person does not claim to be flawless. They are something greater, they are real. Their presence carries weight because it rests not on denial but on integration. This is why acceptance is liberation. It dissolves the endless struggle to appear good, pure, or untouchable. It frees the energy once spent on suppression and allows it to flow into creation, love, and authentic living. The one who embraces their darkness does not become less, they become more. They carry within them both night and day, and therefore they stand complete. But I know how terrifying that mirror can be. You fear what lurks beneath, the impulses you dismiss, the wounds you bury. Yet that which you most need lies precisely where you least want to look. To accept oneself completely, that is the most terrifying and the most liberating of all truths. Do not flee from your darkness. Descend a little more lovingly into your depths. There you will find the roots of everything you yearn to become. Then rise, not as someone divided, but as someone whole. And so, beloved seekers of goodness, go forth with this dark, honest wisdom in your hearts. Let your roots sink deep into the unknown, that your spirit may grow freer, stronger, and truer. In darkness we find the light that truly liberates. Thank you.